All right, everyone, we're getting into the home stretch on Chapter 9. We're going to continue on with our discussion of TV programming and take another look at the world of TV syndication. There are two primary buyers or markets for syndicated programming. There is the traditional market for syndication, which is local television stations. And then the other market would be cable networks. Both groups are looking for programming content to put on their program schedules. So they're both looking at syndication to help them to be able to do that. NATPE International is the convention where new syndicated programs are unveiled, and more importantly, those shows are plugged to those that attend the convention. Syndicated shows are considering the impact of mobile video devices as an additional way to screen syndicated programming, hoping that this new market could add to the traditional financial model. So with the proliferation of the internet, it has made it much easier for program producers to get its content out there, using it as an additional means from the convention to be able to get its content into the sites of various executives at television stations and cable networks. Types of syndicated programming, well, there's movie packages. Today, with the exception of a very few blockbusters, movies sold in syndication are packaged. You're going to find several different movie titles that are put together and made available to TV stations and cable networks. Stations acquire the rights to movies under license agreements. The agreements generally run from 3 to 6 years and allow the station to show a movie up to 6 times or more during the period covered. So when the station buys the rights to a movie, it may get to air that movie several times within a certain length of time. Off-net syndication, another type of syndicated programming. Network programs enjoy great popularity, which sustains over time. So basically what we're saying here is that popular network shows have staying power. They have legs. They're things that continue to have a certain amount of popularity and notoriety with the viewing public for many, many years after they've originally been on the air on a broadcast network. The station or cable service pays for a certain number of episodes in the series and gets the right to show each title a number of times when they go into an agreement with a syndicator. The price per episode for off-net programs varies wildly. It's going to depend on the size of the TV market, the popularity of the show in its first run, the number of programs that are available. There's lots and lots of different factors that go into how much it costs to purchase a particular program for syndication. There's not what's considered to be a sticker price or a market price. It's going to be a negotiation process for each particular show, no matter who the syndicator is, no matter who the local television station is. Basically, the syndicator is going to try to get as much as it can financially for releasing its show, and the local station is going to try to get the best bang for its buck in investing in particular shows. The ideal number of episodes that an off-net show would have would be 130. And that's kind of an interesting number. Well, here's why. 130 shows would mean that you would have, in a typical year, the ability to run each show that is available twice within a year. There's 260 weekdays in a year. So if you have 130 episodes, you can run each episode twice if you're running that show Monday through Friday. By the way, when you schedule a program in that way, when you're running a show Monday through Friday at the same time slot every day, that is a programming strategy called stripping. So when you're seeing weekday shows, for example, you turn on the television at 7 p.m., it's channel 17, and you're watching Judge Judy. It's Judge Judy Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. That show is stripped across that time slot. Some experts regard video on demand and downloading off sites as an opportunity to market programs that don't make the minimum number of episodes to syndicate on television. This is another way that television has been changing with the availability of different sorts of platforms. Sometimes shows can market itself to those platforms to be streamed or made available by cable companies for on-demand viewing, even if they don't have the number of episodes that would be attractive to a TV station for running as a syndicated show. And what can actually happen is that a show can gain popularity on a streaming network, and that can create the ability to create more program content for that show, and eventually that show can go on television as syndicated fare. Game shows and talk programs have been the bulk of first-run syndication. Again, first-run shows being those that had not previously been aired on a broadcast network. Syndication executives point out that it is important to have user-friendly programming that invites advertisers to use the program for brand integration. When you hear things like this particular show has been sponsored by such and such, and to try to create an identity where your brand is associated with that particular program. Certain dramas have also had success in first-run syndication. Shows like various iterations of Star Trek, like Star Trek The Next Generation. Also, there were some popular dramas in the 90s, like Xena Warrior Princess, that have very much made themselves quite a following in syndication. And you also have basically different types of dramas that have aired throughout the years have found a home in syndication and gotten a pretty good following. Battlestar Galactica, is a fairly newer example of a show that's found success in syndication. High-profile programs are being purchased by cable networks to provide a unique flavor to their offerings, making cable the largest single buyer of syndicated programming. As the viewer shift from network television to cable continues, cable has a stronger base to build advertising revenues. Cable becoming more and more popular, therefore it's becoming more and more attractive for syndicators to make its content available on cable. And also the cost per episode fees are much higher than usual for cable programming, because with cable you are reaching out to more of a national audience than just an audience in a particular market like you would with a broadcast TV station. One way that syndication works is by means of barter. In barter syndication, the syndicator provides the program to the station free or at a substantially reduced cost per episode. When you have a reduced cost, that is known as cash plus barter. So the station would pay a reduced rate per episode, but at the same time, there would be some advertising slots within the program that are left for the syndicator's use. So what happens with barter is that out of however many minutes of advertising are within a particular show, say it's a 30-minute show, generally there's going to be 8 minutes of advertising content within that particular program. So a syndicator might keep 1 or 2 or more minutes of that advertising time for themselves to be able to market out to national and regional advertisers, while the rest of the available advertising time is retained by the local station affiliate. So as you can imagine, in barter syndication, the key to the syndicator is for market clearance. The more markets the program plays in, the larger the national audience that can be offered to advertisers. So it is in the interest of the syndicator to get into as many television markets as it possibly can. But the syndicator is also going to be somewhat choosy in terms of trying to get the best deal that it can in each individual market it's in, because they're also looking at the ratings numbers for stations as a whole, just as much as stations are looking at the possible potential audience they could be getting by signing on a particular program. As far as local television programming goes, many TV stations have expanded their local news hole from early fringe and late night to include morning, which is at the forefront of expanding local production. And it even goes beyond that as far as just airing a 30-minute newscast in those time slots. Those periods have seen much more expansive sorts of newscasts, where the morning newscast in many markets now starts at 4:30 in the morning. So you're airing news from 4:30 in the morning until 7 o'clock in the morning, when most areas the network takes over with their morning news magazine shows. You have in the afternoons, you do have most stations starting at 5 p.m. for their evening newscast, and one station in our market, WRAL, now starts airing its afternoon news at 4 p.m. There's advantages to that in that it helps their news presence, their reputation for news coverage in a particular market, and because the station owns the news product, it owns all the time and the inventory, it can be a lucrative thing for stations to take on. In virtually all large cities, there's locally produced alternatives to the Today Show and Good Morning America. They will each air their own sort of localized interview talk show. Here in the Raleigh market, My Carolina is a show that airs on CBS 17. A good example of that. Local cable programming, regional cable news channels, program guides, electronic bulletin boards, weather channels for a local area, all those things becoming more and more prominent on the cable dial as offerings to an area. As far as programming strategies, the first step in programming is to define the potential audience. In other words, who is home to watch TV at what particular times? That's going to play a huge role into the types of programming content that is available on a television station or on a cable network as they figure out what to put where. Programmers must also have some idea about which groups prefer the shows that are available to be used. So you have certain types of content. You're trying to match that content up with the available audience and what that particular audience expects. As far as audience flow, this is another programming strategy. Audiences will tend to stay with the TV station they are watching until something they dislike shows up on the screen. It's kind of that law of physics that you've heard about in your science class. Something that is in motion tends to stay at motion. Something at rest tends to stay at rest. Well, a channel that is on tends to stay on unless there's some sort of force that causes a change. In some ways, audiences exhibit inertia, viewing the same station until they're forced to change. The movement of audiences from one program to another is called audience flow. The successful programmer will build and hold an audience from show to show. The idea here, a good example of this would be if you're home watching daytime television during the week and you're a game show person. So at 10 o'clock you turn on CBS and you've got Let's Make a Deal. And from there, you stick with CBS because at 11 o'clock another game show is on. The Price is Right. So there's audience flow from let's make a deal to the price is right, because it's the same sort of content in hopes to keep that audience they already have. Counter-programming is a technique where the programmer decides to go for an audience different from the audience that competing stations or networks are trying to attract. So if you know that your competitor is putting a drama on, maybe you counter-program with a sitcom. If your competitor is airing news content, maybe you air something of a more entertainment sort of flair. Other examples that are there on your screen as different ways that stations have counter-programmed their competition in hopes of picking up the audience that the competition is leaving behind. You can also go the other route in challenging your competition. Challenge programming is when a TV network or station goes head-to-head with the same type of programming as a major competitor, or goes after the same demographic with a different program with similar audience appeal. So, some examples of this that are pretty prominent: all of the evening network newscasts are on at the same time. CBS Evening News, World News Tonight on ABC, NBC Nightly News, I should say. All of them are on at 6:30 p.m. Outside of that, you might have a network showing a medical drama. So another network will show a medical drama in that same time slot to make the audience choose between one or the other. And you're doing that in hopes that you have the better, more desired, and more ultimately watched show. So there you go. It was a rather long chapter, but we've made it to the end. That's the notes for Chapter 9. Make sure you finish up those notes and those study questions and get them turned in. Participate in the Blackboard discussion board on this chapter. And as always, make sure you're watching out for the latest and any changes that are happening with our class. Stay tuned in to the Blackboard and to your Cougar Mail. Watch for the latest and greatest from BPT 110.